While I'm running, I'm kicking my mic. So you're hearing all this activity.
So now it sounds like you're in a fight almost.
Now it sounds like I'm in a little tussle somewhere.
She has this garden hose of a catheter. I'm kidding you not. It's the size of my finger.
What did his genitals look like?
This guy takes stalking to a whole other level. He had broken into her house and he hid baby monitors all over the house.
A Peeping Tom?
The flasher.
Freak.
The Batwing.
Welcome to Socialite Scants, where we definitely leave you wanting more.
What is a scant?
Scant is something that's very minimal. It's not a lot. It's basically our form of stinginess. We're offering stingy storytelling today.
That makes sense because we have a whole bunch of stories, but they're too short to do a single episode on. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to string a bunch together?
Yeah, we're just going to string a bunch together. They'll be separated. You'll be able to tell the transition into a different story, but we just wanted to have fun. That's all today is. It's just fun.
I think people are typically starting to associate us with these really dark, demented stories.
In reality, we're very fun people. We're not very dark people.
I tried to find the brightest shirt and the most absurd hat that I had in the closet for this episode.
Yes, you clash with the background of everything.
I understood the assignment.
Good work. What's our first story?
First story, Sergeant Shepherd. Now, it's interesting. There actually is a Sergeant Shepherd, and it is spelled like German Shepherd. And Sergeant Shepherd is a canine.
Oh.
Who has a German Shepherd.
Isn't that punny?
Isn't that punny? Exactly. It's kind of a funny story. 1996, that's when I went through the police academy the first time. I had started as a reserve officer, and then finally I got into the academy. So in 96, I'm in the academy, and one of our instructors is Sergeant Shepherd.
Oh, this was a lot of fun, I'm sure.
Yeah, and he has a German Shepherd. So it was always kind of funny to me that Sergeant Shepherd and his Shepherd. There's this thing called sympathetic reflex. We talked about this when I shot baby Jesus.
Yes.
What episode was that?
I don't know. It was a while ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. So sympathetic reflex is when you jerk with one hand, you may clench the other hand, or when this hand does something, you move. If you've ever gotten a massage and they start working this area and all of a sudden your fingers come up, yeah, that's part of that.
Or when you put your finger into the palm of a baby's hand and their hand automatically closes over yours.
So there's all kinds of different things that can cause, but it's a sympathetic reflex. And what a lot of people don't realize is you don't control it. It just happens. That's why it's sympathetic. So as a canine handler, there's kind of a golden rule. You never, ever, ever, ever put the leash to your dog in your gun hand while holding your gun.
Yeah.
And I know some of our socialites are going to be like, well, no shit, Cy. We need to talk about this a little bit. When you carry a gun for a living, and it's not uncommon for you to have that gun out and displayed 4, 5, 6 times a day while you're doing other interactions, there's 2 types of people in the world. Those who have done dumb shit while holding a gun, and those who will, right? It becomes just another implement of your workday.
Now, you're going to catch a lot of heat because people are going to think, you pull out your gun that many times a day?
Yeah, there's a lot of terrible fucking people in this world.
Yeah, I think
we're going to edit that one.
Okay,
the beep.
Yes.
I'm just putting that in for notice.
We'll put in some bleeps there. But I truly think that a lot of people don't realize how many scary people are out there that do want to kill you or other people. I think they have a fantastical mindset of this really good world that they live in.
Let's put some reality on this. I spent probably a decade or more on a SWAT team. SWAT teams don't show up unarmed. Like, yes, we have guns out and ready because we're showing up for a reason.
And now you don't do that every single day, but there are days that are somewhat anomalous that it happens. You just go from bad call to bad call and things just continually get worse.
Right. And as you become more comfortable and that becomes a normal routine, it's easy to make these simple mistakes that just through clear eyes, you'd be like, why would you do that? Who would ever do that? But in the heat of the moment, you're multitasking with 14 things going on. This gun in your hand is not anything new. It's just another thing of your day. Yeah. It's easy to make these mistakes. And I would just challenge everybody, don't be too judgmental until you try it. Because I've seen a lot of civilians come through training, like the FATS training or the simulated training, and just do terrible, like they kill all the victims. Every victim dies. So
and their peers.
So, yeah. So I'm going to give Shepard a lot of shit right now, but it happens. But it's still kind of funny. So he gets dispatched to a burglary call. There's somebody in the backyard.
Oh.
So Sergeant Shepard and his shepherd jump out of the car. They go around to the back. They get to the back gate. The back gate's locked, but it's this weird lock. Somehow he's got to mess with it. And he's trying to get it off, and the dog is assed up. Like the dog knows there's somebody in the backyard. So the dog just wants to do its job.
He's ready
Get me in
to
the back
play.
door. Yeah, get me in. So as Sergeant Shepard is messing with this gate, he's got his gun out because he doesn't know what's on the other side of this gate, right? And as he's trying to do this, it's too much. The dog is pulling on the leash. He's trying to mess with the lock. The dog keeps pulling down. So he transitions.
And he has a strong hand to open the gate.
No, he's using his weak hand because his strong hand has his gun out. So he transitions the leash from his weak hand to his strong hand with the gun.
Oh, dear.
The dog is pulling on it, because the dog wants to do its job. He's messing with the gate, and finally he gets the gate open, and he opens the gate. Shepard darts because it's on the scent. It knows there's somebody around the corner. Hits the end of the leash, sympathetic reflex, pop.
Oh, no.
Accidental discharge.
Did he hit the dog?
He shot his dog square in the ass.
Oh, dear.
For our animal lovers, the dog is going to live. So relax. The dog's going to be fine.
This is
but
good.
The dog is pissed.
Oh.
Turns around, attacks Sergeant Shepard.
Oh, good boy.
Eats him from top to bottom. They both get transported to the hospital. One with a gunshot wound, the other bit, I don't know. The suspect probably just laughed and left.
Okay.
So I remember being in the academy and knowing this story thinking, this is one of my instructors?
Well, it was probably some good experience to teach to new recruits. This is what you don't do, and here's why.
And this is a good point, and that's where I'm going to end this scant, is that humble pie. When you're a police officer, it's fun to make fun of other people's mistakes, but the long and the short is you do it long enough, you will make the same mistake or worse. So you have to be very humbling and accepting your own mistakes as well.
And it's hard to do that. It can be really hard to accept your own mistakes because everybody makes fun of you for 3 months after in your PD.
You get a policy written after you.
You end up in the newspaper or something, and it's a policy written after you. It's so true. Yeah. So that's a little bit of taste of a humble pie, but a fun short scant. So
just remember, sympathetic reflex, be very careful what you're putting in hands that you're doing work with. Ow! Rand Walton. Any Gilbert police officer, and probably a handful of Chandler police officers who worked from probably 1996, 98 through 2002, 2003, knew Rand Walton. I think he died in 2003. Rand was just a pain in the ass drug addict. Oh. He had a house in Gilbert. I think he inherited it from his parents, if I remember right, because he never had a job. He did burglaries. He did whatever he could to make money to buy drugs and sell drugs.
Without actually having to work.
Yeah, he was a terrible community member. We had calls for service in the hundreds at Rand Walton's house. In fact, in the early 2000s, every single Gilbert police officer who was in training would end up on a call at Rand. It was part of your qualification to get off training. You had to deal with Rand Walton. He was part of your FTO, your field training. He was part of your checklist. He
hit the disorderly conduct call on your checklist.
Every single time. So everybody was familiar with the name. They were familiar with the address. And we're going to talk about another case where you just hear certain addresses come out and you're like, oh, here we go. So I'm working one afternoon. I'm off of my field training with Gilbert, and I'm still a pretty young officer, and I hear the Rand Walton address come out, and I'm thinking, oh, Rand Walton. This guy just gives me the EBG. You want to take a shower after dealing with him because you just feel dirty. Mm-hmm. But this one, there's some type of weapon involved, and I don't remember all the details, but this was one where you're not just going to go up and make contact at the door. There was some type of a weapon. I think there was 3 of us. We had Officer Remo. Do you remember Remo?
I do remember.
Remo actually listens to our podcast. So if you're listening, Remo, we're giving you a shout out here. He's commented a handful of times. He was the senior officer on scene. So there's 3 of us. He's the most senior. And we're negotiating with Rand at the front door. And again, I don't remember all the details, but I knew that there was some type of weapon involved, probably a knife or something, and he was just being his normal pain in the ass. When I first started putting this case together, I'm like, I think we tased him. But now that I'm going back, I don't think we had tasers. It was still pretty early in my career. I don't think we had tasers
wow,
yet.
that was a long time ago.
Oh, no. I remember being in law enforcement before there was tasers.
And you just used your baton.
You just had to beat the hell out of somebody or get the hell beat out of you. It was one or the other.
Yeah.
But I don't remember exactly how this one, maybe we just sprayed him really bad with pepper spray.
Oh, so you had pepper spray. It had been invented.
Yeah, we had pepper spray. It's not the, whatever. I'm not even going to respond to you on that one. But anyway, we engage with him. It is kind of a knockdown, drag out in the front yard. Rand gets subdued and he has to be transported to the hospital. Now, Rand also has a ton of medical issues. And I can't remember all of them, but ultimately this is what's going to cause his death a few years later. Probably, I'm thinking...
Getting beat by the cops or medical issues?
Medical issues. Yeah, we didn't kill him. Why would you do that?
I was just clarifying for our socialites.
Yeah, no, he had a lot of medical issues that had nothing to do with law enforcement. It had to do with his lifestyle. He's going to get transported to the hospital, and he's belligerent. And whenever this happens, an officer has to go with the ambulance. Guess who the youngest officer was on scene?
Ray.
So I get thrown in the ambulance. And I'm like, hey, whatever. Rand is the most belligerent, vile person I've ever ran into. If he makes eye contact with you, he's talking shit to you.
How old was this man?
I'm going to say maybe late 30s, early 40s at this time.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't
He's
super old. Yeah, he was a young guy. All the way to the hospital. It was probably a good 15-minute ride. He's just talking shit, like horrible, vile, demeaning to everybody in the ambulance. We unload him at the ER and we're kind of wheeling him in. Anybody he sees, like just people waiting in the ER, talking shit to them. He sees a nurse, starts talking shit to her. And it's terrible stuff, like horrible, horrible stuff. And I'm thinking,
Is he
this
just
guy...
demeaning her?
Yeah, in any way he can. He'll just say the most like absurd, crazy, over-the-top, vile things he can think of just to get a reaction.
Sure.
Like that's just Rand. He's just a pain in the ass.
I know some people like that.
Yeah, we start to come into contact with people like this quite a bit, unfortunately, in our profession. So he's got these ton of medical issues. So as soon as he gets in the ER, they've dealt with him quite a bit. They immediately know who he is, and they're like, oh, Rand. And I've got to be honest, I can't remember what his medical issues were and why, but I know as soon as they saw him, they're like, we have to put a catheter in. And I think he had like a colostomy bag too, if I remember right. He had some type of medical condition where he has like this bag.
Sure.
So they're going to put a catheter in him. Well, the nurse that's going to put the catheter in comes in and starts prepping him, cuts his clothes off. And she's got this little cart she brings in, which is like the catheter cart that has all the catheter stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, the catheter goes into the urethra.
Right.
For you former SWAT guys, that's the pee hole. So they've got to actually put this tube in the urethra.
Okay.
So obviously, at some point, she has to grab his penis, and she's going to put this tube
this sounds
the
terrible.
hole. I've never seen this procedure before.
I'm assuming it's a little tiny tube?
Yeah, it's pretty small. So she gets this tube and they actually kind of like lube up the tube. Like, so she's doing her thing and she grabs his penis and he starts going off on her on all these innuendos of what she can do with his penis.
Rand.
And you can see like it takes her back because he's just over the top. Yeah. And she just lets go and turns around back to her cart. And I'm feeling bad. I'm like, oh, come on, Rand. So I'm yelling at Rand. I'm like, Rand, knock it off. Why are you doing this poor nurse? She's just doing her job. Quit being an ass. Like,
yeah.
She's trying to help you. Just stop.
Being a nice guy.
She doesn't miss a beat. She turns right back around. She has this garden hose of a catheter. She's switched. I'm kidding you not. It's the size of my finger.
Oh my God.
And she grabs his penis again and he sees what's happening. He's like, wait, ma'am. She crammed at least a foot of that thing into his penis hole at the top of his penis and just keeps
and she turned
cramming
to
it
you
in
and
there.
said, you don't need to mansplain for me.
She didn't even have to turn to me and say that. Everybody in the room saw it. Rand got really quiet other than crying and screaming to stop. I was just in bewilderment. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that was possible. She never breaks character. You never see an emotion come out of her. She crams that whole thing in there, turns around, gets her cart, and carts right out of there like nothing happened. Rand got really quiet and nice after that.
Yeah, it's funny how these men can get quiet and nice after they're rambunctious and ridiculous.
So just a notice to everybody, if you're ever getting a catheter, be really nice to that nurse. Otherwise, karma has a way to come back around.
Yeah. It's funny how we talk about these machismo men and very manly men before they get arrested or before they actually have to deal with a female. doing their job. And I recall I was dealing with a man who I'd had at least 2 or 3 domestic violence calls on him prior to this next encounter that we had. And my sergeant was with me on this call as my backup. And we were called to a commercial.
Your sergeant's female as well, right?
Yeah, my sergeant was female.
So
too.
2 females.
Mm-hmm. And we were called to
double trouble. That's what we call that.
Can I go on now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we were called to this commercial building where there's like dollar stores and things like that. He was with his family shopping there. Well, at some point during this shopping trip with his family, he gets into a scuttlebutt with his wife and his kids, and which typically happens.
Like in public.
In public. So I don't remember. I think the call came in from a worker at the store who was very concerned with these interactions taking place because
someone's going to jail.
Yeah, she realized this is not right. And they had video of the interaction, and which we pulled, and it was something pushing going on, light assault, but it was clearly domestic violence, and he had a prior history of domestic violence, which I had already arrested him for. So I'm there again, having this interaction with him, and he's very puffy upon our initial interaction. And when I start interviewing him, we get the video, all this, everything that's going to put him behind bars for another night away from his family where he just loves to have control of. Getting ready to put my handcuffs on him, tell him, turn around. It's time to go down to 4th Ave.
And for those listeners, 4th Ave is our county jail.
Yes. And he starts doing this crying, this pouting, this very murmury pouting.
Like he's sobbing out loud.
He's sobbing out loud, yes. But at the same time, he starts looking up. And I took this from my academy days because I used to have this RTO that whenever we
RTO is a recruit training officer. It's the actual trainers in the academy.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's what I'm here for, not just a pretty face.
So in the academy, I used to have this RTO. He was pretty much one of our lead RTOs for anything physical fitness. So whenever we were out on physical fitness stuff, especially runs, and we'd have to stop and do push-ups and sit-ups and arm circles for God knows how long, if anybody actually looked up to the sky, he would call you by your last name and say, "God can't help you now. Why are you looking up? You look straight ahead. You look at me." And
it's awesome.
In this moment that I was dealing with this man who I had dealt with several times before, he goes into this sobby phase of looking up. And he said, "God, please help me. Please help me." And he has an accent. I'm not going to get into the accent. But I looked at him. From my training, I said, "God can't help you now. Get in the car." And I pushed his head into the car right after I had clicked him, and we were off to 4th Ave. Yes, it was a wonderful day. But it's kind of fun when you get to get back at these very puffy men and these very machismo men a little bit and put them in their place a little bit.
It's starting to see a pattern with you attempting to put men in their place.
So fun little scant from Keri, yeah.
This one's kind of fun. Christopher Harlan. Real name, real person. Got a picture of him here. Looks like a fun guy, right?
Oh, yes.
Go have a couple beers. He might have been a meth head at the time that I had my interaction with him. I'm thinking this is 2012, if I remember right.
Looks pretty cleaned up here. His skin is clear.
Yeah, obviously this is going to be like a booking or a jail photo. Mm-hmm. Now, and I can't remember if it was his girlfriend or his ex-wife. They were broken up, but it was a former intimate partner. And this guy takes stalking to a whole other level. He had broken into her house with baby monitors in hand, and he went around the house and he hid baby monitors all over the house. Like he pulled the couch away from the wall, cut a hole in the back of the couch, stuck a baby monitor and plugged it in, pushed the couch back.
So you can monitor what she was doing.
So he could park down the street with the receiving end of the baby monitors and he could listen to everything she was doing.
Oh, freak.
But then he loved making it known to her that he knew all of these things.
Oh.
So she's convinced like he's got my phone tapped. He's got something going on because she would have a call with like a potential new boyfriend.
Yeah.
And he would start texting her about.
It's just stalking
So
her.
who's Jake? And she's like, it's just my State Farm agent. But there was all of these interactions going back and forth, and she keeps reporting it to the law enforcement, and report after report after report get taken. There comes a point where if you get these misdemeanors and they start to stack up, they do become a felony because of how many.
And because it's considered domestic violence.
And it's usually not that many. I think it's 3 or 4.
It is, yeah.
Right?
It's three misdemeanors before it becomes a felony. That's in Arizona, though.
Right. So at the time, I'm on our fugitive apprehension team, and we're also kind of a special use squad that if they have a problem, they can throw us the problem. So I get a call, hey, can you look into this Christopher Harlan guy? Our officers are going to this house constantly of his ex, taking report after report after report after report. We can't find him. We can't stop him. And it's getting out of control. So I looked, 28 different calls that she has filed 28 separate reports of this harassment over months now. And he's monitoring her communications somehow. We didn't know about the baby monitors, obviously, at that point. He's very tech savvy, and he's kind of a wiry character. Now, he was living in his truck all over the state of Arizona. So trying to find him and track him down was getting to be really difficult. But I had a felony, and finally he had crossed the line where the chief is, hey, go get this guy. We're done. So at this point, I have kind of carte blanche. Go find him. The problem is he's switching phones up on a regular basis. He's really good at open source web searching, like before it was an actual thing. And this is using the internet to figure out who she's talking to. She'll catch a name. He'd research it. She may say a phone number. He would research it. I go and I'm interviewing her. And I finished my little interview, and she's like, hey, he's got my phone tapped. And I'm thinking, he doesn't have your phone tapped. Either he knows a friend. I don't know about the baby monitors, but it's really hard to tap a phone. So I'm like, your phone isn't tapped. And we start going, I'm like, okay, well, if you ever have a problem, if you see him, if he calls you, if you get any interactions at all, call me. Here's my number. And I give her my number verbally. It's my law enforcement. It's my detective number.
And she's in her house.
She's in her house. About 30 minutes later, I start getting these weird text messages. And now he's actually like harassing me because I had given her my phone number. And we start to have these interactions, and I figure out very quickly, like, holy crap, this is our boy. Like, he's actually screwing with me now.
You know what? I remember this.
We were together.
We had just moved in together.
Yeah.
And I was like, who are you getting all these crazy texts from? Like, it's a suspect, I swear.
He loved stalking me at that point. Now, this is 2012. Technology is a little bit different. It's hard to get really good hits. And he would be in these really rural areas. And if you're only using voice and text, it was really hard back then, specifically with Verizon, to get good location. So I could tell you he's somewhere in Tucson, but we couldn't pin this guy down.
Sure.
It was going to be a real pain in the ass. So I'm trying to think, okay, how do I get him to get on data for a while? I need him on his data connection. When I know he's going to be on data connection, put people in place as close as we can get him using data where we get better location information, and let's get a team on him. So we start to look at his regular calls, and I figure out, okay, he's just north of Tucson, but he's out in the desert. So we send a team down there. So we have our fugitive guys down there ready to go.
At this time, did you guys know he was living out of his truck?
Yeah. And we knew the type of truck, but it changes here a little bit. So I'm trying to think, okay, we've got a team there. I need to get him on data. How can I get him on data? I don't know if you remember, but like back in the day, you could look at Facebook and find phone numbers, or you could take a phone number and find a Facebook page. Yeah. You can't do that anymore.
I think this is because of you that you can't do that anymore.
Probably. This was one of our big tools back in the day. We found a lot of people this way, but he would do this with his ex's new relationships. So he was very savvy with everything Facebook. Knowing that, I thought, well, maybe I can get him on Facebook on his phone for a while, create the data connection, which is going to give me better location information, and we can narrow it down. So I'm trying to think how to lure him into Facebook. So I decided to create a Christopher Harlan Facebook page.
Did he already have a Facebook page?
He didn't. This is the first. There's the URL up in the top. This is the first Christopher Harlan Facebook page. But I used a booking photo for his home profile, the long profile pic across the top. I used a jail cell.
The most terrible picture you could find for his profile.
His methed out booking picture. Yep. And then like a guy all sad sitting in a jail cell for the profile picture. Notice that you could actually put back then in the activity there who he saw as inspirational people. I listed the Gilbert Police Department. As one of his favorites, I put the Arizona Department of Corrections as one of his followers. So I set up this ridiculous Facebook page with his friend, his only friend being the Gilbert Police Department. And then I took the URL, the web address, and I texted it back to him.
He probably only did have friends at the Gilbert Police Department.
At this time, yes. And I texted the URL back to him, and he couldn't resist, of course. Like, oh, why is this detective sitting there?
Well, especially a crazy stalker like that, they're going to have a very machismo attitude again.
Yes. And in the URL, his name is at the end of it, right? It shows it's a Facebook page to Christopher.Harlan. Mm-hmm. So he can't resist. He's got to click in there, and he loses his shit. Like, he's texting me terrible things, but he's on a data connection now. And all of a sudden, those 5,000 meter hits we're getting get down to 25 meters.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we have him, and we have a team in place. So I'm like, hey, here's where to go. Go. And I'm thinking he's just on a highway, the side of a highway. And they're there, and they're like, hey, we're here. There's nobody here. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody here. And I said, well, technically, the GPS is actually hitting in this little this dry wash bed, about 50, 75 yards off the road. And they can't see it. There's too many trees. But I'm like, he's probably maybe just west of the road. So they start traipsing through the trees, and they come to this dry wash bed. He had plowed through the trees into the wash bed. When I had texted him earlier, he went to Walmart, bought a case, 12 cans of black spray paint, and he was down in this wash spray painting his truck, so we couldn't find him. And they actually arrested him in the act of spray painting.
Oh, that's truck. Awesome.
Yeah, so there was a fun Facebook scant.
Do we know where Christopher is today?
He went to prison for a year for all of this. He only got a year out of it. And I don't know, he hasn't been back to prison, so maybe he changed his way. So Christopher, if you're out there, good job, buddy. Way to make the change.
Or he moved states.
Yeah, he's in another state. Who knows?
Stalking some other poor woman.
Baby monitor. What a way.
Right? Weirdo.
Let me say an address, and I want you to say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
275 West Juniper.
Oh, terrible calls. Naked guy. Oh, well, we had a lot of calls at that address. This is one of those addresses that we go to often. Everybody knows. You don't even have to say West Juniper. You just say, got to go to 275.
Yeah.
Everybody knows.
It's an apartment complex, so there's a lot of repeat offenders there.
Yeah, so you're pretty much walking into a shit show when you have to go to 275. And they've changed the name of this apartment complex several times.
It's very cosmopolitan now.
False advertising to try to lure people into this newly developed, remodeled apartment. And it's the same people, the same ways, the same rent style, the same landlords.
Are you saying calls for service probably haven't gone down?
No, they have not. So it was really close to end of shift one morning because I was working graveyards. And I think we got off at 7. And a call came in at about 6:25. So shift change hadn't actually started. The other people who were coming on for their 7 a.m. shift were just starting to get into briefing. So it's still technically my call. It was in my beat. And we get this call of a man, a Peeping Tom, basically, who's also flashing people and looking into people's windows.
A flasher.
Yeah, I had a flasher. So thinking, okay, well, he'll probably be gone by the time I get there, but I leave the report writing room, get in my car, head to my beat, and as soon as I step out of my car, I'm walking down this little walkway, I turn, and I see this typical looking flasher guy.
Wait, what is typical looking?
He had on a long trench coat. This khaki trench coat. I'm not kidding. And I was thinking,
flash you?
Oh my gosh. No, he actually was holding his coat closed. And I looked at him and he looked at me like a deer in headlights. And we realized,
you're like, that's a flasher. And he's like, that's a cop.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's him, right? So he just stood there for a second and I start to walk towards him, like just trying to keep my cool. And he turns and bolts, right? But as he's running and I'm chasing after him, his coat is flapping open and he's turning to look where I am and I'm chasing after him. And these people are coming out of their apartments and they're like, he went that way, he went that way. At the same time, though, I'm running and I'm starting to get out of breath. Well, I used to keep my mic for my radio. It was attached to this little lapel thing that I had at the top of my vest. And I'm trying to call out my location while I'm running.
And you're really good at directions and locations.
I'm terrible at directions and locations, especially if I'm running and I have to tell somebody where I'm at, right? So I'm calling this out over the radio. Dispatch holds the channel for me because I'm in this foot pursuit now.
So what that means for our socialites is when something hot is happening, they'll hold the channel and you get this little tone that starts to beep over the channel, what it's telling everybody else to do. And this is really important for your story. It tells everybody else, shut up.
Stay off the radio.
Stay off the radio. We want to keep the radio open for this one officer because they've got things going on.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I had some shit going on. So during all this, I don't realize it, but my mic comes off of my lapel. So while I'm running, I'm kicking my mic. So you're hearing all this activity.
So now it sounds like you're in a fight almost.
Now it sounds like I'm in a little tussle somewhere. And in actuality, it's my heels kicking my radio as I'm running through this apartment complex. Well, it's still a little bit dark out. So I'm not sure where I'm going necessarily in this apartment complex. I'm getting a little bit turned around and I eventually lose him. I have no idea where he went, but I know my backup is on the way. And now I have a lieutenant on the radio finally asking me, are you okay? I'm like, I'm good. Everything's good, right? Then he says, well, what did he look like? So I start giving a description of this man, what he was wearing, this trench coat, and he had no clothes on underneath. And he said, well, how was he down there? What did he look like? And I was like, well, what do you mean? I said, he was naked. He's like, well, what did his genitals look like? And I knew that I didn't know for sure. Yes, it was something of that effect. All I know is that I remember thinking, well, he was flaccid. So I said he was flaccid on the radio. I don't know for sure. I was thinking this must be the only thing they're getting at. Like, was he hard? Like, I didn't know what to say. So that's all I said. But I also wasn't sure why he was asking me. It was the oddest thing. Like, maybe they were just putting me on the spot to see what I would say.
I think in moments when people aren't on scene, but they have to have some type of control over that scene, people will start asking the dumbest questions on the radio. I remember a very similar situation where we had, and I think I've talked about this one before, we had a completely naked person running down the side of the street wearing a hat. And it gets dispatched out that white male, 6 feet tall, completely naked, running down the street, only wearing a hat. And I shit you not, an officer got on the radio and said, what color was the hat? Like, because if he's wearing a red hat and I see a guy matching that description in a brown hat, I don't want to get him mixed up. Right. Yeah.
So I don't know if this man was ever found because it went to investigations after that.
Did you feel bad for getting smoked on your little foot pursuit?
I did kind of, yeah. I felt bad.
So frustrating.
Yeah. He was really tall though.
Oh, wait.
He had a nice gait.
Can we clear? I'm sure he did. Can we clear something up for our socialites?
Yeah.
So when it was your turn to run, maybe you didn't run so well.
No, I didn't. It was also at the end of my shift.
Karma.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry I gave you crap.
I make a lot of fun of SWAT guys. They eat crayons. You have to have hand puppets to get them to explain things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's because of experience of hanging out with a lot of SWAT teams. And I'm going to put SWAT mentalities and military mentalities together because we're going to end this episode on some military stuff, which is pretty funny as well. But we're going to talk about some SWAT training. 2003, Gilbert PD, big going on. Yeah. Getting a new building. We're getting a new jail. For the first time, Gilbert PD is going to have its own real jail. So the SWAT team has to go through cell extraction training. And what this training is meant to do is if for some reason an inmate who's in a jail cell somehow arms themselves, how do we deal with that in this closed environment without hurting them or hurting ourselves? Like, can you safely resolve this? So there's this whole training series on cell extractions. How do we get people out of jail cells as safe as possible? So we had people from the Department of Corrections come in. We're doing this big training, go through this whole day. And at the end of the training day, we're going to get a tour through the new jail, which is still under construction.
Okay.
just to give us an idea of, hey, this is the environment you might be working in.
Wasn't there a movie filmed in our jail?
That is the jail cell that was used in The Kingdom with Jamie Foxx. They used our police department for that movie because it was still under construction, so they could get in and out without all of us being around.
Right.
So anyway, we have a sergeant of our team. He's our team leader. Kind of take on a dad role because it is hanging out with a bunch of juveniles and teenagers for the most part.
Yeah.
And we are going through this tour, and he walks into one of the jail cells, and he kind of starts doing his normal thing. And Bill, if you're listening, and you probably are, I'm sorry, but it was funny. Like he's doing his typical Bill, we are the size of the cell. This is how we do this. Like being very professional, and all of us are just kind of like, okay, Bill. And we've talked about Robbie a handful of times. Robbie was killed in 2006, but before Robbie was killed, he was on our SWAT team, and he's doing this training with us. And Robbie's standing by the actual door, and these aren't the old post doors. These are the big metal doors. And Robbie says something to the effect of blah, 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 and he slams the door shut. And you hear the loud click, right? Uh-huh. Our team leader is now locked in the jail cell. Ha, ha, ha. We all get a big laugh out of it.
How long was he in there?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Bill's like, all right, very funny. Now let me out of here. And Robbie's like, that was awesome. Hey, where are the keys? It's still under construction. Nothing has been turned over. Oh. We don't have keys.
Who had them?
Nobody at the police department. We actually had to call the city manager, who had to call like the CEO of the construction company to call the manufacturer of the jail cell to try to figure out, hey, when you ship these doors, who has the keys? Who do we even call?
How did the architecture firm or whoever it was overseeing the build process not know that the keys weren't taped to the door or something?
Because there's a security thing. These are very secure keys. You can't just leave them out there. There has to be almost a chain of custody, because what if somebody made a copy of them?
I know, but...
So you're not going to tape them to the door.
Wouldn't they think, though, that what if somebody actually gets locked in here?
Well, maybe they would think people are smart enough not to lock themselves in the damn jail cell until you add a SWAT team. I think Bill spent the better part of 2 or 3 hours in that jail cell before they were able to find the person with the keys and get him down to the... There was somebody, we just didn't know who it was. So finally they get him there, and we had to get the sergeant out of... So when I make fun of SWAT
Bill.
guys or military guys, there's a reason.
Good story. We have a good, fun story from one of our peers who he told us this. His name is Officer Gale.
Love Officer Gale. He's actually Sergeant Gale now.
Yeah, he's Sergeant Gale.
Great dude.
He's from Georgia. He was in...
Deep South Georgia.
Yes.
He talks and looks like he's from Georgia.
Yeah.
No disrespect, Dave.
I think his family actually used to wrestle alligators.
Didn't they also have like shrimp boats or something?
I think that was you being...
No. I think they honestly had they were into some type of commercial fishing in the Deep South.
They might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's very
boiled shrimp,
Forrest
fried
Gumpy.
shrimp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I adore Dave. I adore his family. He has great kids.
Just a great person.
He's an awesome person. So I remember him telling us this story about when he was an EMT before he had become a police officer in Georgia. And they went to a call where this man was having some sort of heart issues. They were trying to figure out what to do with him. They were giving him medical treatment, and they're putting him on the gurney. And this man's wife is in a full panic, and she starts screaming, "He needs his peanut butter balls. He needs his peanut butter balls."
The power of peanut butter.
Dave and his peers were like, what the heck are peanut butter balls, right? And they finally start assessing him a little bit more, and they realize that she's trying to get the words phenobarbital out. But
can you pass the peanut butter balls?
So apparently this is what this man and his wife had been calling his medication. They called it peanut butter balls. But it's one of those things to where if you talk baby-like to your kids all the time,
they end up doing it.
They end up doing it too in front of other people. And when you're in a panic like that, and it's something that's causing a high stress situation, you're going to revert to the things that you always say or do in those moments of stress. Right. So just lesson learned. Call things what they actually are, especially if it's medically related, because in moments of stress or panic, you may not remember what it actually is, and it could be important. So if you don't have a team of people working for you, if you're injured or sick or for one of your loved ones, who can decipher what it is you're actually saying, you could be in a lot of trouble.
You mean you don't just naturally assume phenobarbital is also peanut butter balls?
Right. No. I've got some peanut butter cups.
Wasn't there a similar situation? I think some of that is accent, though, too, because I can think of another situation about a country.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is not law enforcement related, yes, but sometimes there's accents involved, and you really have to decipher things. This has happened to me a lot, actually. When I was working...
You attract nonsense.
I do. I don't know why, but I have a couple of stories here. So this has to do with accents. I was working one of my very first ZetX clients on the East Coast, which was in this little town in Massachusetts.
And all of the towns in Massachusetts, super easy to pronounce.
Right. Yeah. So this man, he was very nice. And I think he knew there was a language barrier for me because he had a very, very strong Boston accent, very thick. I remember I actually told him once, I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm so sorry. Can I try calling you back? Because I needed time to actually try to translate in my head what it was he was saying. And I finally got in touch with him and was able to communicate. But I actually just started communicating with him via email instead because it was easier for me to read what he was writing without having to listen to what he was saying.
Need an interpreter?
Yeah. So that's one of those things. But then one of these other situations happened to me. We were on a cruise in Europe, of all places, going down the Rhine River. As we're going down the Rhine, sometimes Germany is on one side, sometimes France is on the other side. Sometimes it's just Germany on both sides going down the Rhine. But
you're also like the Netherlands and at one point Switzerland. So there is a lot of country borders that you go through, correct?
We get to one of our stops, and on this day in our location, Germany was on both sides of the river.
We were deep in Germany.
Yeah, we were deep. This woman who was with some of her friends and family, I suppose
They were from South Carolina. I remember an earlier conversation, South Carolina.
They were from South Carolina. I knew they were from the South somewhere. Their accents were very Southern-like, which is fine. I love Southern accents. But she started commenting on some things surrounding us as we were getting ready to go on this excursion. And there's lots of things going on environmentally because we're there in the spring, right? We're seeing lots of new types of landscape and plants. And she says to the group, "What country is that over there?" Something like that effect. And I said, that's Germany. And she said, "No, what kind of tree is that over there?" And I didn't know whether to feel like the dumb one or out of what. And luckily, everybody else piped up and said, "Oh, we thought you said, what country is that?"
Well, she did say what country, but she meant kind of tree.
Yeah. And so I didn't know whether to feel bad or a little creeped out. I wasn't sure, but I do end up in those situations a lot. I'm not sure why.
Right. We have to keep our reputation. You know, there's got to be a little bit of a sexual story in here somewhere.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of a $5 hooker?
Yeah.
I actually looked this up when I was putting this one together. It is on Urban Dictionary. So it is a real thing.
Hooker.
Yeah, it's not me making it up. But I did some research, and it was during the crack epidemic. And what it was is people were so desperate for crack, they were literally doing sexual acts for as little as $5. Kind of crazy, right?
Gosh.
But it is an actual thing.
Okay.
Well, we get word of a big prostitution thing going on in Little Gilbert. This is not going to be. Now, keep in mind.
Where did you get this word from?
On the streets, where you get all the words. But overwhelmingly white Mormon town of Gilbert, we had some shit going down. Mm-hmm. And we did have a lot of crazy cases over the years.
Yeah.
But prostitution was never on that list.
No.
And now all of a sudden, we've got the black eye of prostitution in our town. Can you believe it? The oldest profession has now made its way to Gilbert. And what it is an extended stay hotel. Apparently, we had prostitutes that would rent out rooms. Guys would come over and start soliciting. So we are having the Johns. And this is all third, fourth party coming into the police department.
Was this hotel right on the border of Gilbert and Mesa, though?
Country Club by San Bispo.
So technically, it's Mesa.
That's what I was saying. It's Mesa prostitutes. What do we care? But it got to be enough where they're going to do an undercover operation.
At the extended stay?
The extended stay.
Who's
now,
doing
we
an
don't really
undercover?
have a vice unit.
No.
There's no really a need for one. So they grab a female detective and they're like, hey, go put on some scantily clad clothes, go hang out at the pool, kind of look the look, and we're going to see if we can get somebody to solicit you for sex today. If they do, we're going to have a wire on you, get them to agree to a certain amount, get them to agree to the sex act. We'll come in and arrest them, and we're going to shut down this rampant prostitution.
Did she go in a full one piece?
I don't remember, but
Like a full rash guard?
I'm going to leave names out of this one.
Okay.
I wasn't confident that this was going to be a successful operation.
Why?
I'll just leave it at that. So we put in our undercover. We're monitoring. We're listening. Doesn't take long. Sure enough, she's approached by a John. There is a prostitution issue. And boom, just like that, we got a fish on the hook.
Oh my gosh.
So they start their negotiation. She starts at $100 for a sex act.
What kind of sex act?
Oral sex.
Okay.
He's like, ugh, it's pretty steep. So the negotiation begins.
$100 is steep for somebody who's at the extended stay. Was this a patron of the extended stay?
She had all of her teeth.
She had a full set of eyebrows.
Yes. No meth sores.
Oh my God.
You get what you pay for, woman.
Yeah, she's
So
$1 million.
anyway, they're going to start at 100. It quickly drops to 50, then to 25. He's not biting.
But he's negotiating with her.
He's negotiating. It's very clear he is actively asking her for oral sex, and the only thing to figure out at this point is the price point. When they get to $5, we call the operation. But I shit you not.
Was there a possibility it could have gone lower than $5?
I think she had him at 5, but I refuse to arrest somebody and book him with any dignity in my face at all. That, yeah, we just popped the crime of the century because this guy offered $5 for oral sex. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, what are we doing here?
Oh my gosh. So were there ever any other offers? Did the operation continue?
No, I think we learned our lesson. Like, this just isn't our bag. This isn't our gig. Like, let's move on.
Oh my gosh. So now there's probably prostitutes all over Gilbert
running
because
rampant.
You didn't pursue $5.
Yeah, but they're probably at like $3 now. So is it really a crime?
Oh my gosh.
The Batwing. All right, let's wrap this up with one final story. This one's going to get a little crude.
Okay.
The Batwing.
Oh dear.
When I worked at Gilbert and when I became a sergeant at Gilbert, my brother was a team leader for a special forces team, deploying a lot. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years worth of deployments. And every year before they would deploy, they would take 2 weeks out of their schedule and they would do a very specific training mission. So 2 weeks, very focused, concentrated training, but they would move away from their military base to get everybody out and away from the normal wear and tear family administrative details so they could just focus on training for whatever mission it is that they're deploying on, right? The Phoenix area, a lot of people probably don't realize we have a lot of resources when it comes to training. There's so many different agencies here and they're all very well equipped. We have different types of shoot houses and training facilities and all these different things. So we started collaborating, I don't know, probably 2004, 2005, the first time we did it. I said, hey, come out to Phoenix. You guys can get like back then, basically the equivalent of an Airbnb. I'll set up all these training venues for you guys. You can get different training. You're away from the military base. You can focus. And it was a complete success.
Okay.
Came out, they spent 2 weeks. I took 2 weeks off and spent it with them. It was really fun because I got to do a lot of the training with them and interact with them, setting up the training.
Sure.
And this thing grew into a real thing. Like every year they started doing it.
Yeah.
Now I've got to plug Shea Homes. It's a construction company, a new home company in Arizona. They're very, very pro law enforcement, very pro military. Shea Homes, you probably remember this. They were starting a huge subdivision in what's now known as Power Ranch.
South Gilbert area.
South Gilbert. And it was booming. It was one of the fastest growing communities in the country at the time. Shea had built a model home neighborhood. And typically when you go to model homes, you'll see maybe 3 or 4. I think they had 20. It was literally an entire street and it was all model homes.
Oh my gosh.
They would literally give us the master key at night and we could train in those houses, different floor plans. You could work different ways of entering a building and how you clear that building in small teams.
Sure.
It was a great training environment. You just couldn't break anything because these are fully decked, fully staged houses. So they have nice furniture. Even the closets have clothes and stuff. So I got them the Shea Home neighborhood for a night. So I take them out there and I have to explain to them, These are special forces guys.
Yeah.
Don't break anything.
And rules are different in the military than they are in law enforcement.
Asking these guys not to break anything is almost asking them not to breathe, right? Like, do not break shit or we're going to lose our privileges here. So they promise not to break shit. They're going to leave all of their gear off so they don't have all this heavy gear that's bumping in and breaking things.
Yeah.
So they're stripped down for the most part. Most of them are just wearing shorts and T-shirts, which will come important here in a little bit. So they start doing their stuff. And one of the guys, Ollie, nice guy, tall, skinny guy, kind of gave off the serial killer vibe, but really quiet, but just a nice guy. His flashlight dies halfway through the thing. I have an extra flashlight. I'm like, hey, you can use my flashlight, no big deal.
Of course you would. Yeah.
And I get a call out. So I'm like, hey, I got to go get my detective started on this call. Probably be an hour, so I'll be back up. Before you guys have to leave, I'll lock up. So I leave. I don't know what's going on. It's about an hour later. I'm finished with my call. I come back. They're, 6, 7 houses deep. I can see the flashlights in and out of the windows. So I make my way to the house. I don't want to walk in the middle of their training, so I'm kind of being careful. And I can hear them laughing and just kind of BSing. So I'm like, it's safe. So I walk in. I hear, do it again, do it again. And then almost in a Batman voice, I hear somebody say, the Batwing.
Oh, okay.
And as I'm coming around the corner, they're all in the main living room. This is a 2-story house. And the main room, it goes all the way up to the second story. So there isn't a second floor above it. And then it kind of opens to a loft area. So there's one big wall that's just wall.
Okay.
This guy is doing what I call the Captain Morgan.
Okay.
Okay. So he's got one leg up on the couch. The other leg's on the floor. He's butt naked.
Oh, no.
He has a hold of his scrotum and he's pulling it out as far as he can. And he's pushing a flashlight up against it and turning his flashlight on, which is basically making a shadow puppet on the wall that looks exactly like a Batwing.
So it's like a projection screen of his scrotum.
And if that wasn't bad enough, as I'm seeing this, I'm like, what the hell are these guys doing?
And they're all just standing around laughing at this.
They think it's the best thing they've ever seen. And then I look, it's my flashlight.
Oh.
To which they don't see me yet. So
Did you feel a little sad?
Yeah, I was like, ugh. But I interrupt the fun by like, hey, that's my light. And he turns around and sees me all surprised and shocked and literally like stops what he's doing, wipes the end of my light on his leg a couple times, like, sorry, man, here you go. And I'm like, no, just keep it. I didn't like that one anyway.
Wasn't my favorite or anything.
And I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? It's total chaos.
I have to ask.
These are the defenders of America.
How does somebody even know that that's going to work? Like, how do they know
You
to
clearly
do that?
have never been deployed to a third world country. You get bored. You figure out all kinds of things.
If we could only all be so creative with our appendages, I suppose, but
it
how
continues.
do you even...
So they get all of them back on track finally, and they have a couple more houses they're going to do. Well, one of the things that you train for in these situations is not being distracted. And I know that sounds very simple, but when you're doing a very specific task and you have a very specific assignment and you get a little bit distracted, you're exposing the other people on your team. So there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of training on trying to distract people and making people stay locked up. And that's where they come up with these crazy things that they do to each other while they're clearing houses. So I don't know, 3 or 4 houses later, one of the guys who's playing a bad guy this time goes in the house. Well, in one of the closets, they have it staged and there's a summer dress. So he strips down butt naked, puts on a summer dress that's like 3 sizes too small, hides in the closet. And as the team enters that closet, he flashes them like your guy at the apartment complex. Completely screws the entire team. They all break down, but the lesson is there of things that can distract you.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, are these really like the defenders of America? This is the cream of the crop that we're sending over. And it's funny, I got to know these guys well enough, and then I got to work with a handful of them when I was over in Afghanistan, and I learned something. Outside of a war zone, they're a mess. It's total chaos. It is herding cats. Put these guys in a war zone, though, there's nobody you would rather be with. So it's a very interesting dynamic of them in and out and where they find humor.
Well, when you're relying on people to save your life, or you know that you have to save someone else's life, the dynamics of a relationship and relationships, I think, become far more complex with the intimacy, I suppose.
The Batwing isn't so obscure then.
Yeah, it's not so
It's not uncomfortable at all.
Yeah. You become very family member-like with a lot of these people when you're relying on them to protect you and save your life.
Yeah. So we're going to end on the Batwing because where do you go after that? However, if you enjoyed this episode, we started putting this list together and I probably left at least 6 or 7 off. We'll keep the list going. I don't know, maybe quarterly we'll kick out a Scant episode.
Yeah. And if you hated it, please let us know. I know you'll be really honest in the comments. You always are. But everybody's actually really nice when they try to give us critical feedback.
And nobody died. There was no crazy, like the Batwing was probably the most offensive thing.
Yeah, the point of it was to keep it light, keep it fun, not only for you, but for us as well. And our team, who is amazing with all of our editing and everything they produce for us in our shorts and reels. So again, send us your feedback and comments. Join us next week. We look forward to having you back.